vengeance!
It's the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about a busy week of racing news. Joining me in the studio is Richard Youden and Louise Torres. Guys, how we doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. Can't wait to be 26 on Friday.
You're so young.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a lot of breaking news with schedules. NASCAR has released their schedule, and it's very different. NASCAR has really had a lot of continuity in their schedule over the years, only making smaller changes at a time. But this pretty big shakeup here. Also, Indycar has not released a full schedule, but they've released bits and pieces of their schedule and information of what where they'll be going and where they will not be going. So that's all interesting to talk about. But let's first delve into this NASCAR schedule. The one thing that just really sticks out is the amount of road courses that we are now running. I mean, there was, for years we had one appearance at the Glen and one appearance at Sonoma. They added the Roval. This year they added the Daytona road course. So next year's schedule, the Clash will be on the Daytona road course, which will be fun to watch. We're adding Road America, Road America is going to be a hit. I'm going to tell you, those people in that part of the country love their racing. The Xfinity guys put on a great show there. Indycar puts on a great show there. They've got great sports car races. I think a cup race at Road America is a win-win. That's going to be a big one. We're also adding in COTA. COTA is going to pick up a NASCAR date. This may be at the expense of the IndyCar date. They may not have the IndyCar date. They may not have the Formula One race back there next year. That is up in the air. But the one thing that we do know they will have is a Cup race. And again, the Cup guys should be pretty entertaining at COTA as well. Then the other road course is going to be the Brickyard 400. Will now be run on the road course. I don't know that it's going to be a 400. Certainly, I can't imagine running 400 miles on the road course.
Probably 400K.
They could make it a 400K, which would be about 258 miles, which would be a pretty good distance for a road course there. But they haven't actually announced or released what the length will be. And then the other bit of interest is that the spring race at Bristol will be a dirt race. They're going to load several thousand pounds of dirt and spread it around the concrete there and make a dirt track out of Bristol. And it'll be the first Cup race on dirt since 1970. So interesting. Pocono is going to be a doubleheader. Chicagoland is going to disappear. Kentucky Speedway will disappear. And Michigan, I believe, is going down to one race.
Yep.
So did I hit all the changes there, Louise?
You need to mention also Atlanta and Darlington have two races now. Dover's been scaled down to one. Fontana may be the last one on the 2-mile circuit. And Texas is the All-Star race. And it's now a 1-point paying Cup race at the playoff campaign.
Okay, so they've got 1 points paying race and then the All-Star race. And
yep.
I had heard through the grapevine that the granting Texas the All-Star race was one way of appeasing Eddie Gossage, who's highly territorial and really is not a big fan of COTA, and not a big fan of he wasn't a big fan of IndyCar going to COTA, and I know he's not a fan of NASCAR going to COTA, but so now. And the other thing is that the Brickyard will share the bill with the IndyCars. Once again, they had shared the weekend, and although this year the Cup cars
At
were
the
still
same
on
time.
the oval, not at the same time. I think that would be yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have class drivers, like class victories. That would not be something.
That would be something else. So, of all these new races, guys, which one do you kind of want to delve into and talk about a little bit? We can, talk about some of these different things there. Richard, which of these most appeals to you?
I think the Cup car at Coda is going to be pretty entertaining there. The Formula One still does have a contract for next year. I don't know when the contract expires on Coda, but they definitely do have a contract for next year. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be bought out or some sort of agreement come up. But Coda's a great facility. It's a world-class facility. It's one of the best around, and it'll be interesting, for the NASCAR guys to go there. It's a million miles away from most Cup tracks in terms of facilities. It'd be interesting to see what they do with pit road and all that sort of stuff. I don't know. Is there a pit road on the back stretch that they could use? I don't think there is. But because obviously where the start-finish line is at the moment for a conventional race, it's all built up as for IndyCar and Formula One style pit garages. So a million miles away from.
That might be interesting to know.
NASCAR. Yeah, I wonder if there is a back stretch.
Yeah, because
the non-main race series, if you like. I don't know. It's an interesting thought, but it's going to be great. I know they've tested there in the past. I think Martin Truex Jr. tested there 5 or 6 years ago, and Haas with they did that PR thing with Tony Stewart and Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean a couple of years ago. But it'll be good. Be interesting to know if they use the full circuit or if they use a reduced layout, because it's a long track. I mean, that would be probably 2 minutes 30 lap time in a Cup car, I'm guessing. I can't remember what lap times we did when we were testing out there, but it's not going to be a quick 1 minute 30 lap. It'll be it'll stretch out for sure, but it's good. It's six road courses I think this year next year for Cup racing. It's going to be really good. I think it's going to be I think it's the way that the series is going to go, because they are entertaining. The cars aren't designed naturally to race on road courses, which is what makes it so entertaining, and separates out the field a little bit, gives the guys who really understand the vehicle dynamics and the car dynamics and how to make the cars work on a road course, compared to some of the guys who, are the oval experts. So I think it's going to be great. I'm
certainly.
looking forward to it.
Some of my favorite NASCAR races happen to be at Watkins Glen and Sonoma, and like I mentioned earlier, the Xfinity guys put on a great show at Road America and at Mid Ohio. So watching it just feels like NASCAR is just throwing a lot of darts in the air to just kind of shake things up, make things different. I mean, we've never had this many road courses, and they're scaling back to 1.5 mile ovals. They're doing different things with race distances, and the doubleheader at Pocono is, Pocono's dates have always been, in my mind, a little close together.
Close, haven't they?
Yeah, because there's one in June, one in July. This way you get your whole bang for your buck in the over the course of one weekend. So
by the looks of it, there isn't or at the moment there isn't a pit road on the back stretch at Coda, but so they may have to do something in the existing paddock area. But I still wouldn't be surprised if they didn't use the half circuit or whatever they want to call it. There is a cutoff halfway through the S's at the start of the lap that comes in sort of 3/4 of the way down the back stretch. So it wouldn't surprise me if they don't use the what I'm going to call the national circuit, as we do in Silverstone and places like that.
True. The other thing we didn't mention was the addition of NASCAR or Nashville to the NASCAR schedule. This is the Nashville Super Speedway, the one that's right outside of Lebanon, Tennessee, where previously they had hosted IndyCars, and this facility's been just used for mainly racing schools and stuff over the last several years. But there was a lot of.
They used to race truck and Xfinity there, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
NASCAR ran there along with ARCA.
Yeah, but there's a lot of talk about putting some money into the Nashville State Fairgrounds Speedway, but I guess all that fell through, so they're gonna bank on going to the Nashville Super Speedway, which I think it was Jeff Gordon who said, right market, wrong track. So we'll have to see what happens there. Yeah.
Or any shot of getting the fairgrounds eventually on the calendar. It's gotta have to be a hit financially to see maybe the powers that be with the fairgrounds and also the MLS soccer club, are keen to keeping the fairgrounds as it is, or more than willing to have all those revenues, because that boils down to those guys if we're going to see any fairground action and cup in the foreseeable future.
Right. So the other little bits of news are that some folks were kind of hoping that Iowa will be granted a cup date, and that didn't happen. And so it was the Iowa getting a cup date to some folks. It was like a do or die. You know what I mean? It's either get a cup date or the track's going to be torn down or sold. I guess they're struggling kind of financially there, and I believe NASCAR's just willing to get rid of it and let it go. Some folks have speculated that Roger Penske should buy it, just to keep the Indycars there. I mean, I love how people like to spend Roger's money for him, but so Iowa didn't get the date. And let's talk about some of these tracks losing dates. Now, Chicago, we had already reported back in May that there are some rezoning plans there to rezone that and tear down the track and, make the whole thing into a subdivision, rezone it residential. So it looks, the fact that the track has announced that, not only will they not be hosting NASCAR, but they will not be hosting any racing activity, kind of gives a lot of life to that story that, the Chicagoland Motor Speedway will be no more before you know it. But the interesting one is Kentucky. So this leaves Kentucky without a marquee event. I'm sure they still may get a Xfinity and truck date out of it. But here's a facility that they've recently put a lot of money into. They repaved the whole thing in 2016. They did a major project where they tore up the whole track to fix all the drainage problems. And here, just 4 years later, now no cup date. Yeah,
and the governor from Kentucky is not pleased about it. I caught a little bit of an article that he's not too pleased about the decision that Cup is not going to be going back to Sparta next season.
Well, they said that in as far as impact on the economy, that the NASCAR race in Kentucky is only second to the Kentucky Derby in as far as economic impact. So that's that definitely is a blow. I do know that I've spoken with the managing director out there at Kentucky Speedway, and that they would love to host the IndyCars. They would welcome IndyCar back with open arms. But the story they're getting is that IndyCar really doesn't have any interest in going there, and I don't fully understand why, because it's right in the heart of the IndyCar market. You know what I mean? We're just a few minutes. That track is a few minutes from Cincinnati. It's only 90 miles from Indianapolis. And it's only less than an hour to Louisville, which are all major metropolitan areas. So I don't know why IndyCar is not interested in Kentucky, other than the fact that after 2011, they kind of have really been gun shy about any mile-and-a-half ovals other than Texas.
Yeah, I don't get it. At this moment, IndyCar is sorely in dire and needing at least a couple more ovals. With Iowa likely going to be gone, and then Richmond, without even hitting a lap of that circuit, because Richmond is gone. I mean, they had a 3-year deal, and now they're just not going to run it at all. I'm not. I don't get their mindset, and that's part of the frustration that I have with when Robin Miller posted that leaked schedule, the possibility that that's going to be it. It's rather underwhelming, because IndyCar used to be all about the ovals, but now there's only just in the 500, of course, doubleheader at Texas, and of course Gateway. All popular. Well, Gateway's a popular venue, and of course the 500. Texas has always put on some kind of a show, but Other than that,
Yeah, the crowds at Texas have dwindled, but they still do okay. They still, because they host a couple NASCAR races there, he makes a profit by the end of the year. He doesn't go totally broke running IndyCar. So yeah, I mean, adding a Kentucky onto the schedule wouldn't be a bad thing. It's right in the market, and
it's also not as banked as Las Vegas, which is one of the main reasons why there's been so gun shy about it. Vegas has a different style of banking that's probably still more If I remember correctly, isn't what the current Kentucky sort of still similar with the Kentucky they last ran in 2011 to a degree?
No, because when they repaid it in 2016, they banked turns 1 and 2 a little higher. They added a little banking to turns 1 and 2. Then they narrowed. They narrowed the pit exit and that part of the turn. And some folks say, well, that's just going to be unsuitable for Indy cars now. I don't know if it is or not until you get the Indy cars on there and run them.
Have a private test one of these days and see if it pans out and see what the drivers feel.
The Indy Lights test in Kentucky every summer. Even on the new configuration. So
I don't see what's stopping IndyCar from trying to do it. I understand testing is a hard thing to come by these days, but it's one of the few series that does it with relative ease. NASCAR obviously has that ban. Formula One, they have it at certain times, but it's mostly banned otherwise.
Yeah, and IndyCar did draw a very nice crowd at Kentucky for a time, until they started fiddling with the date. When they pushed it into October, I think, and then they pulled it back to Labor Day weekend. And the crowd started to dwindle when they started fooling with the date, which, obviously that's the same thing that happened out there in Fontana. But I want to say from 2001 or so to about 2008, 9, they had a pretty good, healthy crowd there.
Yeah, that's the thing about date swapping. When you switch it too much, it's gonna hurt. And that's what I feel like Homestead might end up looking like, with now that being after the Daytona 500. With people, and that's one thing I wanted to comment about one of the schedule changes about Homestead. Bear in mind, you have Speed Weeks, which is now condensed to a whole week with the Clash and pole qualifying on a weekday this time around. Whether or not we'll eventually find out what the format of the Busch Clash is another topic for another time, but you don't not only have Daytona Speedway, you also have the races at Volusia and New Smyrna. And I imagine plenty of folks go to those races as well to get their racing fix. But when you add Homestead the following weekend, will people show up to it? Because you got to consider their finances is not looking great with the pandemic. I can't imagine how hard or how much of a hit it'll have with everything, albeit Florida is one of the few states that have been not so hesitant, that without hesitance they have allowed crowds in some capacity. And I imagine come Speed Weeks, it's more and more going to grow. But
I think the other thing you've got to consider with that Homestead date is, and they did it a few years ago with that whole West Coast swing, the transportation costs for the teams are not inconsiderable. And especially now, the teams are trying to tighten their budgets in terms of, and if they can make a saving on transportation costs and not having to drive back and, backs and forwards up and down the country. It's not a cheap operation. They'll be saving, a few dollars here and there, which for these new teams and smaller teams is very, very important. So I understand what you're saying in terms of that from that aspect, but what's the distance from Daytona down to Homestead?
it's not that far at all.
Are people going to travel from Miami to, how many people travel from Miami to the Daytona every year? And how many people travel from the Daytona area down to Homestead every year and aren't going to do it this year because they're back to back? I don't think it's a huge, impact. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll be different. I think it'll be difficult to gauge next year because I can imagine even in February there'll still be extremely limited spectator numbers compared to what we're used to. But
true.
I don't think by February we'll be back to normal yet.
No, I mean the weather in home for the Homestead race he's always a little bit hit and miss, and I think bringing it forward to February probably does secure the weather there a little bit better as well. And you're not I'll try to say that again. You're not up against as many other sports as you are, at different times of the year. I think the Super Bowl's been and gone by then. So what other professional sports are being run at that time of year on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday evening to
I think it's
clash
because
with
of
it?
the Super
There's
Bowl.
not many.
Yeah, I think it's because of the Super Bowl. That's why the Clash have been moved on a weekday instead
Yeah.
of the usual Saturday, Sunday, all that stuff. And with ARCA being a double back-to-back following, the day before
It's
Daytona 500
contagious.
Yeah, the day before the Daytona 500 is ARCA and Xfinity, where it's completely unorthodox to think about it because we have been established what day is what for speed weeks. Maybe it's just only a 2021 thing, but if it turns out to be successful, then it's probably for the long haul.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot of stuff unorthodox about the next year's schedule.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and again, like I say, they're pulling out all the stops to try to add some variety, add some spark. I like some of the changes that they've done. Other things I question, but let's talk about this.
Well, I mean,
Okay, no, go ahead, Richard.
Well, my last comment was we talked about this a few weeks ago. 2020 has obviously been a crazy year, to put it mildly, and so many sports, not just the racing world, have had to think, outside the box for their scheduling and the format and the training and the spectator participation and the like. That I think it's actually probably shown some of these sports. Actually, we can do this. We can do things that we've never thought we'd been able to do before. So that's not just motorsports, but all sports. You may see a shuffling of formats and the like to, because they've never been in a position to experiment before, and this has been a perfect opportunity for that to happen.
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of things that are, baseball run a shorter season. The NBA came out with a compressed season as well. But yeah, but let's talk about this Brickyard a little bit, because this. Again, this intrigues me. The Cup cars on the road course and the Indy cars, and I believe the Xfinity is going to run on the road course as well. It's going to be a triple header. I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, that on Saturday you'll have a double header of both the Xfinity and the Indy cars running the same day, and then Sunday the headline event will be the Cup cars on the road course.
But you see, sorry, can I just interrupt? Sorry, I don't know.
Sure, no, go right ahead.
But that is, I think, part of the problem here for IndyCar. IndyCar should be the headline event at Indianapolis. It's there. Would you turn around and say, Formula One wanted to run at Daytona? NASCAR wouldn't be an undercard to a Formula One race at Daytona. There'd be a mutiny. Whereas you're going to Indianapolis, admittedly the road course, not the super speedway, but if you should have everything, you should have Xfinity on the Saturday and the Indy cars and the Cup cars on the same day on the Sunday. They should both share that headline slot. I think it's doing a big disservice to, IndyCar's stature, especially at that location. I mean, I've worked at an event a few years ago where IndyCar was the undercard to a truck race. I mean, IndyCars, I'm surprised they've gone with that. I thought they should have done IndyCar and Cup on the Sunday and have the Xfinity on the Saturday. But
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. But then again, there's the realist in me that knows that as much as I love IndyCar and as much as I appreciate IndyCar, NASCAR is still the 800-pound gorilla. They still got more name recognition. They get better TV ratings, and I would like nothing more than to see the Cup cars warm up the crowd for the Indy cars in the main event. But the realist in me just likes the idea of them sharing the same weekend once again, 2 years in a row. And this is something that we thought would never come to pass. And here it is. Second, again, it was the COVID that proved, hey, we can do this and make it work, and now we're going to try it again next year. But I'm really intrigued to see if anybody would try to run both races, because that you got a couple of guys out there like Jimmy Johnson is going to
Yeah,
be there.
Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson's going to be there in an IndyCar, would he? But he's talked about running limited number of Cup races as well. I wonder if he would do both races. Or what about a guy like Juan Pablo Montoya? I mean, wouldn't that be fantastic if he could pick up a ride for both of those races?
That would be neat. Or even a Scott Dixon, albeit if it's an Xfinity race, still having Scott Dixon in NASCAR may be a big deal. It'd be a great crossover, kind of like what Johnson's going to do next season.
Yeah, and
even Kurt Busch.
And you've got a couple other guys who've got a little Xfinity experience. Say James Davison, Connor Daly,
McLaughlin.
McLaughlin. Yeah, he's driven some tin tops. You know, a little more power in those, but yeah, but
endless options for there. And say if Austin Cindric somehow gets the call up to go to Cup next year, depending on Matt DiBenedetto's contract, then you have a Penske car open. I imagine you could bring up some Xfinity Ford cars that if a New Garden or McLaughlin wants to run, you never know.
Yeah, see, a lot of these guys have.
This is what you should do. Both races on the same day, all the drivers pick out of a hat what car you get to drive. So you have like 60 drivers or whatever it is, 20 IndyCar seats, 40 Cup seats, and you just pick a number out of a hat. There you go. You know, whoever you're going to go and race IndyCar. And,
Timmy Hill in an IndyCar, wouldn't that be something?
Oh, there you go.
Or BJ McLeod, imagine
but you'd
that.
have to make him Kyle Busch's teammate.
That'd be funny. Yeah, you just a random draw. Yeah, we're gonna put.
I'm sure Kyle will be willing to be teammates with McLeod. I wouldn't say the same if it was Gase or Smithley, though.
Yeah, it'd be just like Garrett Smithley would draw. Oh, you get to run a Will Powers car. And see how that shakes out. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I'll certainly attend that weekend. I'll be making plans now. It's going to be in August. Last year they did 4th of July weekend, so they're moving back to August, and they're calling it the Brickyard weekend. They've dropped the Brickyard 400 moniker, so we'll have to see what the race distance is. But that's going to be a fun weekend. Again, I enjoy watching Cup cars on a road course. I do. The first one I saw was in 1990 or 1991, and it was a Sonoma, and I was just flipping through channels. I'm like, what is this? It looks just like NASCAR, but that's Sonoma, because I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to NASCAR at the time. I was more of a Formula One IndyCar guy. Then I just got sucked into watching this race, and this cat named Mark Martin, who flipped his car upside down, ran back to his pit box and had his crew run back out there with him. They flipped it back on his wheels. He hopped back in and got back in the car. I'm like, that dude is badass, So yeah, I'm really looking forward to some of the changes that NASCAR has lined up. So, but speaking of the Brickyard and the Indianapolis Road Course, IndyCar will be hosting a doubleheader this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And a certain Mr. Scott Dixon can actually clinch the championship this weekend if everything goes his way. If not,
there's on my birthday, actually.
Yeah. So
maybe the next coming race, maybe the first one. You never know.
I think he could clinch if he finishes first, and New Garden finishes worse than 7th. I believe was the scenario I read that he could clinch race 1 if New Garden finishes. Yep. So, but anyway, so let's before we move on to talking about Formula One in the Eifel Mountains, let's pick us a couple of winners for the road course at Indianapolis. Louise.
Never count out Will Power. I think with that win at Mid-Ohio, I think it's going to do him well. So I pick Will Power for race number 1. As for race number 2, if strategy falls in his way, and based on what we saw, don't count out Graham Rahal. That's my wild pick for race number 2.
All right, Richard, who do you like?
Let's go with Joseph Newgarden to win one of them, and I think Scott Dixon to win the other.
Okay, so actually,
I'm taking a long shot at those two. I know.
Yeah.
Richard, I picked Graham Rahal, so you're
that's more of a long shot, yeah.
Colin Hurst would be my wild card if I was going to pick a wild card.
Or Elio Castroneves in that 7 car. Remember that McLaren had power in that one.
Yeah,
with Ollie before he wrecked the thing, and kind of that's where it's twirled the downward of his rookie year that had so much promise at that beforehand.
That's an interesting one. I know just to spend a minute talking about that. I know not to interrupt and take time away from Formula One, but what testing gets done by IndyCar? By sounds of it, he's been suffering from these concussion symptoms since the Indianapolis 500, which was a month ago now.
Yep.
And there's been a number of races since. We all know the dangers of multiple high-speed impacts.
Yeah, he also had that incident at Gateway too, or at the start.
Yeah, where's the liability? Where's and I'm sure there is somebody within the IndyCar medical group saying, we can't let this happen. What are we doing to screen the drivers? Because you look at, Dale Jr. had the same thing, didn't he? When he was suffering from concussion symptoms, and eventually he turned around and said, "Look, I've got to stop right now." It wasn't an instantaneous thing, and I know the symptoms are different for everybody, but I know they do an instantaneous neurological check on a driver when they have a big impact like that. But do they screen the following week? What long-term protection do they provide the drivers, or is it up to the driver to turn around and say, "Hey, look, I'm just not feeling well"? And then you get the young guys thinking, "Well, shit, I can't turn around and say I'm not well. I'll lose my work." Sponsors and all that. It puts pressure on them.
Yeah, I believe that's exactly the case. What happened with Ward there, or with Askew rather, that he they said that he was tested and screened and tested and he passed concussion protocol. So I don't know if they're tested race by race, but perhaps a big enough impact maybe they should, because I guess evidently his symptoms got worse.
I know they
so,
can,
but
go.
yeah, but it is kind of it is kind of
unpredictable.
Frightening that this is a lingering effect of a crash back in August, and he's raced a couple times since. Makes you
just a comment that I saw when I saw the news. It's like, that's and I know I'm not a neurologist by any stretch of the imagination, but I know that sometimes these impacts and injuries do take a while to become apparent. But they've got some of the best guys in the world at this, and the negative reaction, negative publicity from something like this can be pretty detrimental to sport. So it'd just be interesting to see what the actual timeline of events was with that.
Yeah, it would. So, all right. So, I didn't make my picks. I think you got to look at a guy like Simon Pagenaud, who's won there a couple of times. I like Simon for race 1. And I like Dixon for race 2 and clinch the championship.
Yeah,
what's the weather forecast like for this weekend there?
Chilly.
Okay.
Chilly.
They wouldn't know what to do there in Indianapolis in the cold.
That would have been a neat birthday gift, some chili.
There you go, chili. There you go.
Big bowl of chili, yeah. So,
you could call the race the Chili Bowl. Oh, no, somebody's already done that.
I was going to say, that was taken, yeah.
The Chili Bowl definitely on my bucket list still, and along with the 500, Rogues 24, and yada, yada, yada.
Yada, yada, yada. All right, so Formula One.
Indeed.
We ran at Sochi. Everybody was hoping to see.
Fans?
Everybody was, with fans, yep. Everyone was hoping to see Lewis Hamilton.
Sorry. Everybody?
Okay, well, a lot of folks were anticipating that Lewis Hamilton would match Michael Schumacher's record of 91 Grand Prix wins this weekend, but that didn't come to pass. Again, some penalties for Lewis. So Richard, take us through this. And by the way, Valtteri Bottas for the win.
Exactly. We saw in qualifying a masterful lap by Verstappen to get P2 there. Hamilton took a dominating pole in reality, and Bottas just couldn't get his lap together through a disjointed qualifying session there. I mean, in fact, Hamilton was lucky to get through Q2. Vettel had a pretty big impact with about 2 or 3 minutes left, and that sort of red flagged the session and threw everybody's lapse into a little bit of confusion. And I think Hamilton only crossed the start-finish line with about 1.5 seconds left to go to get his lap in, which would get him through to the Q3 slot. And I'll say this, I don't often agree with Christian Horner, but I think he was spot on with his comments post-race regarding Hamilton's penalty. So the scenario was there, when the cars leave pit road, or leave the pit lane on their lap to the grid at the start of a Formula One race, they are allowed to do a practice start at the end of the pit lane. There's a little designated, painted on pit box, or start grid slot, where they can do a practice start. And they use that to get the clutch bite point and make sure everything's, functioning correctly. Now, Hamilton, I think, was sort of slightly late out of his garage, and he gets to this designated area, he pulls in, and he's like, oh, guys, look, there's, a load of rubber down here. I'm not going to get a representative start because obviously there's not the same amount of rubber on the main grid. Valid point. Quite a smart, thought process. So the team comes on the road, yeah, don't worry, Lewis, drive down into the pit lane, you can do a start there. Not a problem. And this is almost out on the track. So he drives down there, lets a couple of guys go past, does a practice start, gets to the grid. Not a problem, as most people thought. Per FIA rules and regulations, you're not allowed to do that. There is a designated area where they can do practice starts on their lap to the grid. And this is, as per the penalty we saw in Monza for Hamilton and Mercedes, this is provided in the pre-race bulletin that the race director, Michael Massey, gives to all the teams via email and communication. Probably the drivers even get it directly themselves. I don't know how the distribution works on that. But again, it shows, to my mind, and from Christian Horner's comments, a certain amount of arrogance. Twice they've missed what I would consider pretty fundamental pieces of information that A, everybody else knows, and B, a professional organisation like Mercedes should be on top of. They should be reading that document cover to cover. The race engineers should know that document inside out. The driver should know that document, inside out. And they're not. Every other team knows it. Every other team is fully aware of it. So why aren't Mercedes, and why wasn't, now whether it's, the Hamilton side of the garage, whether it's Mercedes as a whole, I think there's some questions that need to be asked there. And I think, I'm surprised that the Monza situation wasn't put it bluntly, a kick up the arse for those guys. So, okay, look, we made a mistake here that nobody else, one other guy, but pretty much nobody else in the field made. Why did we make that mistake? Why were we not allowed? Why did we fall into that trap? Okay, we didn't read the document properly. Okay, well, 2 races later, they do exactly the same thing. So there should be questions asked there, and I imagine they won't do it again in a hurry. But yeah, that was justified to my mind. There's a set of rules there for safety purposes, and he didn't follow them. And, there's no excuse. The FIA aren't ganging up on Hamilton to try and deny him a world championship or anything like that. He's just not following the rules. Into the race, reasonably processional race in many, many ways. Once Hamilton had served his penalty, Bottas got ahead of him at the start there from P3, and also Hamilton got ahead of them. Bottas got ahead of Verstappen there, and Hamilton just sort of controlled the first period of the start. When he came in for his pit stop, he had a 10-second penalty from that, start violation. And it just was pretty processional out at the front. There's some good racing back in the pack. There's a funny situation in many ways where Esteban Ocon tried to let Daniel Ricciardo through so Ricciardo could attack Leclerc, I think it was. And Ricciardo actually ran wide and cut the exit of the turn 2 corner, and he got a penalty for that. And, Daniel Ricciardo comes on the radio and says, well, I guess I better need to drive faster then. It wasn't bitching and whining and complaining about it like Hamilton was. He said, right, okay, lads, I've got to drive a bit faster. And he did, and he pulled out a gap, and, he kept his place. So fair play to Ricciardo for that. He showed a lot of maturity and a lot of, determination. So got to give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine the race team at Renault appreciated it, like shortly after, like, cheers, mate.
Yeah, because it was a bit of a clumsy move. It really was. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, Aston, if you're gonna let your teammate through, you can do it a little bit better than that. Yeah, so it got a little bit clumsy, but they did what they needed to do, and it was it worked. So it worked in the end for them. But it's Sochi. It's never the most entertaining race. Turn 2 caught a couple of guys out. Carl Sainz had actually a nasty accident at the start of the race coming out of turn 2. He missed the chicane, or there's a sausage, what they call these sausages on the exit of turn 2. And if you go to the left of it, if you go to the left of the sausage, you've got to go through like a runoff area, and if you're to the right of it, you can carry on. Sainz went to the left, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I need to take the little escape route, as it were, and just pushed it too hard and actually took his left front corner off on a bit of wall that was jutting out. So they made it look at that. I don't think there's anything wrong with the turn 2. I know some people were saying the turn 2 is a bad corner. I don't think it's a bad corner.
There were plenty of guys who went off, like Grosjean. I brought up a virtual safety car. And also even the F2 race, there was a couple instances like that. And it's a very difficult circuit, but it was a tough week for those barriers, that's for sure. For both
and the actual, talking about the F2 race, the sprint race on Sunday morning in F2 was it's normally about 20. I think it's supposed to be 22 laps. It was actually stopped after 8 laps when there was a very nasty accident in turn 3, which is a big, long, 180-degree, almost flat-out left-hand sweep. 2 cars came into contact with each other and embedded themselves in the sort of styrofoam barriers, or they were not sort of more than just styrofoam, but the barrier system they have there, and one of the cars caught fire, and it was pretty dramatic actually, and they decided to stop the race there a little bit early. But hey, Sochi, you're never going to have a phenomenal race like a Silverstone or a Spa or a Suzuka or somewhere like that, because it's just not that type of circuit. But there's a few good moves. A few guys came through the pack. It was okay. Kudos again to George Russell and his qualifying performance. 32-0, I think he is now in his qualifying against teammates.
Yep.
But again, George just struggled with Sunday pace during the race. He was started on the medium or the soft tyre, I think it was, and he came in to make a stop under the first lap safety car period, went onto the hard tyre, which Rosberg in the past got Rosberg to the end of the race in 2016, I think it was. But then George flat spots it 2 laps after the restart and has to come in for another. It's just a bit messy for George. His 1 lap performance in qualifying is phenomenal. He just really needs to, improve his race pace. That's what's holding him back right now.
Yeah, and I would totally love to see him finally get a loose point. I want him to at least get it before 2022, because it's guaranteed should he one day end up in Mercedes, but it'll be more special if he gets points beforehand.
For sure, I think that would be the sense of achievement from him. I mean, because he deserves it more than anybody. I think. I look at what George has done in the last 18 months there, very similar into what something like Fernando Alonso did when he was at Minardi at the start of his career. Obviously signed up to a bit, Alonso was with the Renault program, but, George Russell with the Mercedes program. It's really solid, impressing, not scoring loads of points, but, doing a really damn good job. And, that experience that he'll be gaining, and you saw it from Charles Leclerc when he was at Sauber, the racecraft that you can pick up from tussling with cars, in the back of the pack, it's invaluable as you get through your career, because at some point you will need to do it. So no, I can't speak highly enough of the guy. I think he's a fantastic talent. He's got a huge future. I just, I agree with you there. I just love to see him get a point or two. As much for him as for the team. I've been really impressed with what Williams have done this year, with the turmoil of a buyout. And they couldn't get much worse than last year, but if you look at the percentage lap time improvements, they're the most improved team of 2020. So, fair play to them. They've done a great job. They fully deserve a point or two here and there.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. So let's look forward to Nürburgring is where we're going next, and there's a couple of Formula 2 guys, certain Mr. Callum Ilott and a certain Mr. Mick Schumacher.
Ilott, but that's okay.
Ilott.
Yeah, it's okay. It's
Okay, yeah, I don't get a lot of Formula 2 news that I can listen to. I have to read it all, so I have to imagine how to pronounce these things.
It's a British thing. It's a British thing. It's okay.
All right, so Callum Ilott will be in the Haas car in
Correct,
free practice 1, right? And
Yep.
Mick Schumacher will be in the Alfa Romeo. So both these guys are going to get some seat time in a Formula 1 car as part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. So what are your thoughts here? These guys are both pretty darn good. I think Ilott's a little better than Mick, but Mick has come on really strong the last several weeks. And again, he's got the name recognition.
He's got the name, and then sometimes that's a detriment. Sometimes it's not always what you want, but. You look at Mick in some of the previous in some of the categories he's been in before Formula 2. He's always had this tendency to start slow, maybe even take like 18 months to get up to speed, and then when he's got it. His starts have been fantastic. I mean, if you want a guy to get off the line, start at Monza a few weeks ago was phenomenal. Starting the sprint race at Sochi last weekend was phenomenal. And he's now leading the championship. He's pulling away from the rivals with 1 round. I think there's only 1 round to go in Abu Dhabi. I think they finished their season in Abu Dhabi. So it gives him an opportunity, I think, to do the young driver test. Because I don't think they can do the young, and they can do the young driver test and Formula 2 in the same week. But it gives him a chance to go and do that. It's a home race for him at the Nürburgring. Somewhere I'm sure he's driven before, so he's got a bit of experience there. And it'd be good. I think that Ferrari have a wealth of talent right now, with both Mick Schumacher, Callum Ilott, and Schwartzman as well, who's the third string in that Ferrari bow. You imagine that Schwartzman is going to stay in. He's only a rookie in Formula 2, and he's dropped off a little bit because Schumacher and Schwartzman are teammates at their, I think they're Dam. Are they with Dams? No, I can't remember. But the team that they're with in Formula 2, and their teammates. And start of the season, Schwartzman was breeding Mick pretty comfortably, but the tables have turned a little bit on that one. So you imagine that Schwartzman's maybe going to stay for another year in Formula 2, but you'd certainly look for both Ilott and Mick Schumacher to make that step up to Formula 1 next year in one capacity or another. Obviously, Ferrari have a veto on one of the seats at Alfa Romeo. So at the moment, Giovinazzi's been in there for the last few years. He's done okay. He hasn't embarrassed himself. He hasn't dug up any trees, though. So more than he hasn't done anything wrong, I just don't think he's done anything really well. And I think it's an opportunity now. So I imagine that Ferrari will place one of the guys at Sauber. And I think with the Schumacher history with Sauber, I imagine Mick will go there. And of course, the Schumacher family still live in Switzerland, so it's a convenient placement for that. Where Ilott ends up, could it potentially be in a Haas car? Ferrari have no direct input into the Haas driver lineup.
Right, but Haas is certainly looking at retooling their driver lineup. That's been heavily rumored that they want fresh guys in the cars next year. So.
Yeah, again, neither of the, Grosjean and Magnussen haven't done anything terribly wrong, but to the same extent, they haven't done anything amazing. They haven't dragged the car up to, higher levels. They've always been, they've always put the car where it deserves to be in many, many ways. So you'd like, though, they'll probably keep one of those two guys, or an experienced driver along with Ilott. So maybe a Perez and Ilott combination, who knows? Although Gunther Steiner did say that Perez wasn't a particularly attractive option. So, interesting.
Interesting. When you've got Grosjean, you don't think Perez is an attractive option. Okay. All right. So.
Well, no, sorry. I misquoted. Gunther Steiner said it wasn't a no-brainer.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's, he says,
that's what,
Okay. That makes a little more sense than he's not an attractive option.
Fake news.
No, we've got enough fake news in the world. Okay, so now are we racing at the Nürburgring this coming weekend, or do we have the week off?
We got a bit of it. like October 9th.
October the 11th is the actual race date.
Okay,
a
so
weekend
yeah,
from there.
next weekend. All right, so let's
Yep.
let's move on and talk about there was a Cup race at Vegas, and it was Kurt Busch taking the win. His first win on the season, right at the right time, keeps him solidly in the playoffs. And Louise, you had written an article about the exciting finish to an otherwise kind of mundane race. So I'll let you take us through the Vegas race.
Yeah, if you watched the last 35, 40 laps, then you pretty much saw everything that went down. The only memorable thing that happened in the first 225 or so laps was when Joey Logano and Kyle Busch got into it, almost at the same area where they came into blows in 2017. But fortunately, both cars kept themselves straight. They went to pit road, and they recovered all right. If it wasn't for those cautions late in the race, they would have had a disastrous day.
Yeah, Logano was sort of always pegged the second guy one lap down, wasn't he, for huge stretches of that race?
Yeah, and we were wondering, oh boy, this is gonna hurt them big time in the playoffs. And while Logano is still slightly ahead, I think it was like 9 points over Alex Bowman, who holds the final spot, and then there's Kyle Busch, the first one out. It looked like a disastrous day, but then you had incidents involving Jimmy Johnson, John Hunter Nemechek, and William Byron. Then it boiled down to pit strategy, and Matt McCall, which people have given flack over the years, especially last July at Daytona, when had he stayed out, he would have won over Justin Haley, but that didn't happen. But he's slowly becoming, and I think Kurt said it best, that or I think it was somebody else on another podcast mentioned it best, that McCall is not afraid to pull different strategies and see if it sticks. And this one, it definitely sticks. Great restarts by Kurt. And now, who would have thought in 2020 he would have won before Kyle? Much less a Chip Ganassi car would have won before Kyle.
And hey, Kyle's kid won a race this weekend too.
Yeah,
Kyle had where his brother and his son both won races, and he's again going home empty-handed. Poor Kyle.
Didn't they share? They were saying on the announcers were saying that they were going to share a flight back. Oh, but that was an awkward flight, wasn't it? Oh.
Well, Kurt had fun on its own flight, roaming around downtown Las Vegas, saw everything in Sin City, and then the Allegiant Airlines Stadium where the Raiders play.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, it was a big win because that was his hometown.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, no crowds got to see that, but this could be, who knows, that was a sentimental win because one of the CBS reporters said there's a 50-50 chance that 2021 might be it for Kurt.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Kurt is how he's over 40 now, is he not?
I think he's about 4. I think he is 40 now.
Yeah, so he's at the sharp end of his career. If he were to have a farewell season next year, he's had a great career. Daytona 500 winner, won a championship, but here he is, right in the thick of the playoffs now.
I just wanted to sort of reflect a little bit on that race as well, a little bit from more of a strategy standpoint. And you'll see it so often in Cup races, especially on the sort of the mile-and-a-half ovals, where, anything within, say, the last 10 laps is a caution, 10 laps to go or whatever, and there's 20 guys on the lead lap. It's almost a no-win situation for a big group of guys. So if you're the leader and you stay out, you know what's going to happen. Everybody else pits. So you're the leader. You pit the top, 4 or 5 guys, 6 guys pit. And, it's almost like the leader is, to my mind, adversely penalized under that situation. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but it'd be interesting to look back on, the last 5 years of NASCAR when there's been on a circuit that gives you that ability to pit, stay out in the last 10 laps. How many leaders with 10 to go and that, have actually ended up winning a race, because it's almost like, it's just, I wouldn't say it's not fair, but I don't know if you sort of get where I'm coming from with this. It's sort of, it throws up such a huge variable, and you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're in a no-win situation, but you've driven the last 360 miles or whatever it is, and you've got to the front, you've claimed this lead, and then, oh, yeah, look, there's a, brake hose 10 yards in the infield on the backstretch. Let's throw a debris caution to make it exciting. Well, that just screws this guy's race. I don't know. I thought that was a little bit unlucky for some of the leaders, because obviously I think Kurt stayed out, didn't he, and managed to claim the win there.
Yep.
It's Alex Bowman who was leading, wasn't it? And then
it was Bowman's race to lose. It kind of
and he did.
And he did.
Yeah, and Kevin Harvick was a complete after. It was between Hamlin and Bowman this time around. Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but it's just like I know that they want to keep people interested to the last. And I know like the overtime and the green white check and all this. Oh, it's so exciting. But it's like, dude, these guys have busted their balls for the last 3 days, in a regular season, apart from this year, to get to that position. And the pit crew has been spot on all weekend, and they've executed, and everything's been, and then that happens. It's like, oh, we're not just go home, just park it, because we're not gonna, we're not gonna win. And I don't know. I just think it's a little bit overly unfair, for want of a better word,
or overly manufactured.
Yeah, but
manufactured drama. Yeah,
if they threw a red flag, it would have been more manufactured, if you ask me.
Certainly, yeah.
Because you have overtime. There's no need of red flagging unless a big wreck happens in overtime.
Sure. And you damage, there's damage to the track to repair.
Oh, yeah.
Do you say, with 10 laps to go, pit road closed? If you want to pit, you have to start at the end of the longest line. Because if you've got to pit, like maybe because you're low on fuel or you've got a damage or whatever, and you don't, the fact that you can just continue makes it worthwhile. Almost like they do at the end of a stage. They shut pit road with 2 to go. Do they say, right, with 5 to go or 10 to go, we're going to shut pit road to stop that sort of unfair, jumbling of the order? I don't know. I'm sure as many people have made, have won races as well. Obviously, as many people have won as have lost. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Then the question will be, then a couple crew members may not be happy to say if it was a late race where fuel was concerned, they cannot pit. Well,
When
you mentioned if they can, they go to the rear.
Under a caution.
Actually,
yeah. I mean, it needs some tweaking, because how many times have you seen one guy pit, another guy not, and then just the
it just ruins the race.
Yeah. Well, and the contrast between the guy on fresh tires or the guy who took 4 tires against the guy who took 2, when all this went down in the last 10 laps of the race. I'm with you there, Richard. I understand fully.
And often these debris calls and where a guy just like brushes the wall are so subjective on the NASCAR. And I don't care what anyone says, they do it deliberately. You put in this, you go to Phoenix at the last race of the year, and Jimmy Johnson's leading with 3 to go, and somebody brushes a wall. There's no way in hell they're throwing a caution. No way that's happening. Or if the championship 4 are all running back in like 15th position with 5 to go, and there's a wheel nut or somewhere on the track, they're going to throw a caution to get those guys to the front. It's I wouldn't say it's manipulated, but it just, again, from a purist standpoint, from a purist racing standpoint, there's something which doesn't sit comfortably. It could just be my dinner, but I don't know.
Could be your dinner, yeah. So we're off to Talladega, correct?
Yep.
So let's we've just got about a minute or 2 left in the show. So you guys want to try to pick a winner in the crapshoot?
Let's see. I'm gonna go with, I'd say, Tyler Reddick. Why not?
Okay. All right. Now, Richard.
I'm going to go with a guy who was super impressed in the first 3 rounds of the chase and had terrible luck at Vegas there with I think it was a belt felt came off the water pump, but Tyler Reddick's teammate Austin Dillon, I think they could get it done at a super speedway. Because sure as hell they ain't going to get it done at the Roval.
No.
Let's go for a punt on Austin at Talladega. He's got to win basically to keep his playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, there have been a couple of folks actually picking Austin Dillon for this week, as he just based on his pretty darn good record on the super speedway races. So I'm going to go with Keselowski, who's got a really great record at Talladega and a great record of pulling the win out of his ass when he needs to stay in the playoffs. So
that's true.
with that being said, we are out of time. So I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank you, Louise. Thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio and Spreaker, and I want to thank you folks that listen to us week in and week out. Until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.